Alright guys, let's now talk about HTML attributes. So I'm going to talk to you about different attributes that you can use with the form element, this particular form element here. Okay, so the first attribute we can talk about will be the action attribute. Here we have action, and then you have the value that you can assign to this attribute. So the action attribute will define the action to be performed when the form is submitted, when you click on the submit button here. So usually the form data is going to be sent to a file on a server when the user clicks on the submit button. And here, for example, as you can see, if you click on submit button, the data that you are going to write in your form is going to be sent to the user data.php file. And most of the times, or usually, this file will contain a server-side script that will handle your form data that you sent over. And what you can also note is that if the action attribute is omitted, the action is set to the current page. Okay, so if you don't specify, the file where you want your data to be sent over, the browser or the system is going to consider the actual or the current page as, the destination of your action. Yeah, so that's it for the action attribute. Another attribute that we can talk about is going to be the target attribute. So the target attribute is going to be used, for example, if you want to specify where to display the response that is received after submitting your form. And this target attribute can have, various values. For example, if you say blank here, as we can see here, that means that the response is going to be displayed in a new window or a new tab. But if you say self, for example, that means that your response will be displayed in the current window. And self here is actually by the default target. You can also say parent, for example. So parent means that the display will be in the parent frame, or you can say top like this. That would mean that the display is going to be in the full body of the window. Okay, and as I said, the default value here would be self, which means that the response will open in the current window. But if you say blank, for example, that will mean that the response is going to open or display in a new browser or a new tab. So that's it. And then we have another attribute, which is the method attribute. So the method attribute is going to specify the HTTP method to be used when submitting your form data. So your form data can be sent as URL variables when using the get method, or it can be sent over as HTTP post transaction. That will be when you use the post method. But what you need to note here is that by default, the default HTTP method when submitting your form data is the get method. Okay, so when you say get here, that's it. So some things that you need to note about the get method is that it is going to append your form data to the URL, in a name value pair. And it is really not recommended to use the get method to send sensitive data. So never use get to send sensitive data. For example, if you want to send email or password and all of that, you should not use the get method to do that, because the submitted data is going to be visible in the URL. Another thing is that the length of a URL is limited to 2048 characters when using the get method. And also we can say that the get method is useful for form submissions where a user wants to bookmark the result of his submission. And also the get method is good for non-secure data like query strings in Google, for example. So that's it, what you can note about the get method. Now, for the post method, what we can say is that it appends the form data inside the body of the HTTP request. That means that the submitted form data is not shown in the URL. And also the post method, when you're using the post method, it will not have any size limitations like the get method. And the post method can be used to send large amount of data and all of that. And form submission with post cannot be bookmarked. Okay, so you cannot bookmark your form submission if you use the post method. So it is always recommended to use the post method if you are, transmitting sensitive form data. So always use post method if the form data contains sensitive or personal information. That's it. So now another attribute that we can have a look at is the autocomplete attribute. Okay, so if you say autocomplete and you say here on, so the autocomplete attribute is going to help you specify whether a form should have autocomplete on or not. So when autocomplete is on, the browser automatically complete values based on values that the user has entered before. Okay, so if you entered, like for example here, when I write, it is suggesting values. Okay, so that's the use of autocomplete. So another attribute that we can talk about is the no validate attribute. Like if you say no validate like this, so this particular attribute is a Boolean attribute. So when it is present in the form element, this will specify that the form data or the input should not be validated when submitted. Okay, so if you put no validate here, when you click on submit here, whatever data that needs to be sent will not be validated. So that's basically the use of this attribute. So guys, that's it on some of the attributes that you can use with the form element or HTML tag. And if you have any question, feel free to write them in the comment section. In the next video, I'm going to talk to you about HTML form elements. We're going to take some time to detail these elements in a dedicated video. So if you like the video, feel free to like it. And don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel. Let's meet in the next video.